I grew up in the 70s.
Yeah.
In lovely Sudbury, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a huge Habs fan when I was a kid.
Yeah.
The Holy Trinity in Montreal is Rocket Richard, Jean Beliveau, Guy Lafleur.
Correct.
So this one hits hard. And I actually talked to a lot of guys that played with Guy the day he died last Friday. I mean, Yvon Cormier was shaken. He was rattled. Very, very emotional. Yeah, it's sad. It's really sad. Like to lose a childhood hero. Yeah. It's not great. It's not great.
So Andrew Berkshire said on his podcast, and I think that this finally encapsulated why this was so shocking or devastating.
Yeah.
Is because, I mean, he was 70, and that's young by today's standards to pass away.
Sure is.
Yeah. He was 70. My grandmother was walking golf courses at 85.
Right.
Still, you know what I mean?
Right.
But not only was he young, but he seemed young. Mm-hmm. He still had that air of mischief about him. He's still, whereas like Jean Beliveau was an old man since he was born, right? But Guy was a child until the day he passed on.
Well, and until he was diagnosed, he looked great. People would remark on how healthy he looked, how great he looked.
Yeah.
And as Cormier said, we knew this was coming, but it's still devastating.
Yeah.
And so then you start to think about legacies, things like that, right? So, I mean, with Lafleur, it's interesting because the time that he shone brightly was actually kind of brief. He had 3 years in the NHL where he was not terrible, not bad, just good.
Yep.
Then he had 6 years where he was, in my estimation, the best player in the world. He was otherworldly. And then for the rest of his career, he was mediocre. But those 6 years he was the best player on what you could argue is the best, most dominant NHL team that there's ever been. Including the 5 cups in the 50s. Like that 70s team, the way they won and just the manner in which,
I don't even think that you can argue.
I mean,
to be
okay,
honest.
so what did they lost 11 games one year and 8 games the other. The two of the in the middle 2 years, they lost 19 games.
Yeah.
The Colorado Avalanche are, I think, still in first place overall.
Yeah.
They've lost 18.
Right. Yeah. I don't think that you can even argue that they're the most dominant team of all time. Just I think that Merrick said it the other week. He said, what's the most dominant team of all time for regular season and playoffs that could just go like a lawnmower, like a wood chipper, just through everything.
Yeah.
And wouldn't slow down.
Right.
And he said the same thing. And of course, Merrick's a big hockey history nerd.
Yep.
So if he says it, then, a decent chance it's fairly accurate. But so in terms of his legacy, Where do you feel that he stands amongst all-time great Canadians?
Well, it's interesting. I think in terms of the game itself, he's definitely, I'm not sure if he's top 10.
Yeah.
Because it's getting crowded up there.
Yeah.
He's probably top 20 for sure.
Yeah.
In terms of the organization itself, I know this is not going to be a consensus opinion. Mm-hmm. I think the greatest Montreal Canadiens player ever was Jean Beliveau, and I don't think it's close.
Yeah.
People will disagree with me on that. They will maintain for now and forever that the greatest player the Montreal Canadiens have ever had is Rocket Richard. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with that. Mm-hmm. I would probably go Beliveau, Richard, Lafleur as being 2 and 2A to me. But the greatness of Lafleur does not, like, the numbers don't do it justice. There was the aura about him. there was the wow factor about Guy Lafleur.
Yeah.
You know, and I actually talked to Brian Engblom, who only played with him for about 6 years. You know, he basically said that, you know, when Guy would get the puck, you could look up in the stands and you could just see people starting to rise out of their seats, right?
Yeah.
Like they expected something incredible to happen almost every time, right?
Yeah.
In his prime. And I'm telling you, Dylan, I was, you know, I mean, we're going to talk to Elliot about this later, but I was a huge Habs fan growing up. I was in grade 12 in 1979.
Yeah.
Watching that game with my friends, game 7 of the semifinal against the Bruins. And so they take the too many men on the ice penalty. And this is Montreal's chance. And when Lafleur had that puck, as soon as he crossed the blue line, I knew. I said to myself, this is going in. This is going in, and Montreal's going to win this game.
Yeah.
Like I just knew it. Yeah. You know, and that was, to me, that there's an unquantifiable, immeasurable aspect of Guy Lafleur that, you know, that and part of it, and the big part of it is that aura, that presence, that wow factor, that just that sense of anticipation that you were watching something really special.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that anything could happen when he touched the puck. Like, I can't remember. I think it was Pete Mahovlich. He actually was Guy Lafleur's line mate early in his career. What Jacques Lemaire came, it was a little later.
Yeah.
And Guy and Pete Mahovlich was a centerman, and he has the Canadiens record for assists in a season with 82.
Right.
And he said to me, he said that year, he says, I got so many of those assists by breaking out, drop passing at our blue line to Guy Lafleur and letting him go in and do the rest.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, I'm not sure if it was Engblom or somebody else said, you know, our whole power play breakout sometimes was just give it to Guy behind the net.
Yeah.
You know, and he said, you know, like Guy Lafleur could not play in the system-based NHL that we have now.
Yeah.
You know, it's just Guy Lafleur was just like, give me the puck. I know what I'm going to do. I'm not sure what you guys are going to do.
Yeah.
In some ways, don't really care what you guys are going to do.
Yeah.
But I'm going to take the puck and I'm going to do something special with it. Yeah. And you don't see that as much. I mean, you know, Connor McDavid is, you know, he's a freak.
Yeah.
He's Steve Dryden, who works at TSN and I used to work with at the Hockey News, calls him the most evolved player of all time. and he's right. He's absolutely right. Yeah. But you put Guy Lafleur in a group with guys like Connor McDavid, you know, Bobby Orr, Pavel Bure, you know, guys like that, Howie Morenz.
Yeah.
You know, those are guys that their biggest hallmark was their speed and their skill. You know what I mean? And all of those guys, every one of those guys had that indefinable, immeasurable quality about him that when he had the puck on his stick, you just, anything can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you to tell that story about the 79 goal, the very famous goal, right? The gingerly goal. The gingerly goal. Yeah. Lafleur steps gingerly over the blue line. Yeah. I was going to ask you to tell that story because I thought that it was a really good story and I thought that it really typified Guy Lafleur. And the thing is that he was an everyman.
Yep.
In so many ways, right? It really reminds me of kind of like what Arnold Palmer did for golf, where it was just, you know, he's out there, he's smoking his cigarette, and he's just, you know, like he was an everyman, and he made people fall in love with the game, and largely the whole systems based hockey that you were just talking about was specifically to neutralize guys like Guy Lafleur,
right?
And
hold them up in the neutral zone, yeah,
right. And in many ways, and I was thinking about this because I was asking you, I've leaned on you a lot over the last couple of days about you know, stuff around Guy Lafleur, and I was thinking about why I didn't think of him as being the number one player in the world during his time of being the number one player in the world. Obviously, I was not alive to see that. And I was thinking because
And I was in high school.
the same age I am now.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that it's because he was sandwiched by all of these other players, and he was just playing on this dominant team. So Bobby Orr was right before him.
Right.
Jean Beliveau was right before him, right? Mike Bossy was right after him,
Right.
You know, and then Wayne Gretzky right after that, and Mario Lemieux, of course, right? Or as Bill Clinton says, lummox. But my point is that it's because sandwiched in all of these superstars, right, was the greatest team of all time,
Right.
and you've got Lemieux. You've got the big three, right? You've got Cornway. You've got Dryden.
You mean Lafleur, not Lemieux.
Oh, my goodness. My apologies.
Yeah.
You've got Lafleur. You've got the big three. You've got Dryden. You've got this team that dominated, as opposed to Bobby Orr, as opposed to Gordie Howe, as opposed to Mike Bossy, as opposed to Wayne Gretzky. And it's not to say that those guys weren't on incredible teams. I mean, you know, Gretzky played with Coffey and and Messier, and you know what I mean. Like, it's not to say that it wasn't a fantastic team, because it was by every stretch of the imagination. But it's rather to say that their names were just so elevated above their teams.
Yeah, but you know what, Dylan? You, as you say, you weren't around to see it.
Yeah.
When you were around to see it, Lafleur was the guy. Lafleur was the guy.
Absolutely.
In the NHL.
And
it's funny, you know, like people talk about.
I'm just saying, as history will remember it. They see that as the Canadians. The 1970s Canadians is seen as its own thing, as opposed to Gretzky being seen as its own thing. You know,
right? Well, it's funny because everybody talks about the mystique and the magic of the Montreal Canadiens, and like Lafleur embodies it, right? So Rocket Richard, is the guy, right?
Yeah.
He has all those, he has the 50 goals in 50 games. He's the great French Canadian superstar.
Yeah.
It's funny because before the Rocket came along, the Canadians actually didn't have a bunch of really good French Canadian superstars on their team.
Right.
The French guys that were really good were guys that were Ontario French guys. Right. So like Aurel Joliet and, and all these guys. Right. And so Richard comes along. He's the guy, right? Mm-hmm. He's the touchstone. He's the cultural touchstone. He's the new face of Quebec, whatever. Right.
Yeah.
So he fades away as they're winning Stanley Cups. His career kind of fades into the background. And by the time they win the 5th cup in a row in 60, he's pretty much done. Yeah. Right. So then Beliveau is right in his wheelhouse there.
Yeah.
So Beliveau picks it up through the 60s. And I always call the Canadians 60s as the forgotten dynasty.
Right.
Because they won in 60.
Yeah.
They won in 65, 66, 68, 69.
Yeah.
They were one upset in the Stanley Cup final in 67 away from winning 5 cups in a row in the 60s as well.
Right.
And they were brilliant. They were brilliant teams. And Beliveau was the guy through there. So then Beliveau gets them through. He retires after they win the cup in 71.
Yeah.
Has 76 points. Probably could have kept playing.
Yep.
And then Lafleur gets drafted in 71, right?
Right, yeah.
One ahead of Marcel Dion.
Right.
So, and then he picks it up. And really, I mean, no one has been able to pick it up since. No one's been able to pick up that torch, French, English, or otherwise.
Yeah.
They've had some great players and they've had some great goalies, but nobody's been that guy that you would say. I mean, Patrick Waugh comes darn close.
Yeah.
Patrick Waugh, they won 2 cups they had no business winning, and it was because of Patrick Waugh. So that counts for a lot. But he doesn't have that, it's still not that sort of magic that you see with these guys.
Even the identity of the team changed because they were the ultra skilled Canadians, right? And it's not to say that, especially like a guy like Larry Robinson was not exactly soft, right?
Nope.
But they were the ultra skilled Canadians.
But they always had toughness. Of course they always had toughness.
But what I'm saying is that then, their their franchise centerman was Guy Carbonneau.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now it's not to take anything away from Guy Carbonneau. I think that he was a fantastic, perennial Selke player, but he wasn't that Guy Lafleur. He wasn't the Jean Beliveau and closer to Jean Beliveau, I guess. But,
not close. Not close.
I mean, in terms of mold, not necessarily in terms of greatness.
In terms of his
style.
No, just in terms of his, kind of leadership, I think would be where you'd say that.
Last thing that I want to say about Guy Lafleur, there's that photo circulating recently of him sitting on that motorcycle, and it's such a great photo because first of all, it's just a little Harley Sportster, and it's just such a classic, like understated, like this just could have been anybody sitting on that bike. This is just like, I swear I've got a picture of my uncle that looks exactly the same, sitting on the exact same year, make, and model bike, which I now have in my garage, not running.
Cool.
And I'm going to put back together at some point or another.
Nice.
Right. And then it just typified his kind of that duality of being a superstar and an everyman.
Right.
And finally, the amount of courage that he had to be riding a motorcycle with an open chain in big 70s bell bottoms.
Probably with no helmet too.
Well, no helmet, of course, but the bell bottoms. Because I've always thought that if there's something that I want very close to the chain of my motorcycle, it's as much fabric as possible.
It's interesting because, I mean, in talking to his former teammates, Ken Dryden said he never saw himself as a superstar.
Yeah.
Like he never saw himself that way. And he really felt like he needed to earn his way to what he accomplished.
Yeah.
Never wanted to be treated like a superstar. Never, Steve Shutt still like, and he didn't tell me this time.
And that's the name I forgot to mention, Steve Shutt, for being such a fantastic player as well. But sorry.
Great. Anyway, so he told me this story a long time ago. He didn't tell me out after Guy died, although I did talk to him and we brought it up again. It's 76 Canada Cup. Mm-hmm. They're in training camp in Montreal.
Yep.
And so their big thing is they're off their dry land thing for that night is they're going for a 5-mile run. Right?
Yeah. You wrote about this.
Not an 8-kilometer run, a 5-mile run. Yeah. That's how long ago it was. I mean, so anyways, they get this guy from the RCMP,
YMCA.
The YMCA. Yeah. He comes out. He's like this fitness consultant guy and like super fit and everything. And so he's going to lead this 5-mile run.
Right.
So they start and Lafleur just takes off.
Yeah.
Guy from the YMCA can't even catch him, right?
Yeah.
He's just gone.
Yeah.
And everybody comes back to the dressing room and they're all like in various states of disrepair because they've just run 5 miles, right?
Yeah.
And Lafleur's sitting in his stall, smoking a heater. And he's like, what took you so long, Yeah. Another thing I want to touch on briefly, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but it's really sad that we've lost, in the last little while, we've lost 3 all-time greats.
Yeah.
Mike Bossy, Guy Lafleur, Dale Hawerchuk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all been in one way or another because of tobacco.
Yeah.
Bossy and Lafleur were both smokers, heavy smokers.
Yeah.
And not, that was part of their culture growing up, right? You smoked when you were a teenager in Quebec. And when you're a superstar teenager in Quebec, it's okay, right? Dale Hawerchuk, a big part of the reason why he died was because of cancer that he got from chewing tobacco. Cultural things that could have been prevented and weren't. And now we've lost, 3 of the all-time greats of our game because of it. So I just would think that, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to get preachy, but if you need a little nudge there, to quit, this might be it.
Yeah. You heard the Rodney Dangerfield joke about that? My doctor wants me to start smoking so I can quit chewing gum.
So,
it's a good point. I mean, we learn more and more. Alcohol is also a class 3 carcinogen and causes cancer. And, so it's, it's be careful, take care of your health. And, but yeah, to your point, I mean, even up until very recently, the 2003 Toronto Maple Leafs is the worst kept secret that half of them were hacking darts in the laundry room in between periods.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's,
I don't think that culture surrounds the game anymore.
No,
like I don't even know if
the
there's,
same way.
I don't know if there's, I'm sure a fair number of players smoke weed or take it in other ways. But I mean, you just don't hear about that anymore, that a guy smokes, because it's impossible. You can't do that and have a career.
Ozzy Osbourne said when he quit smoking that it was like a professional runner kicking a brick wall all day long. When you said take weed in other ways, I immediately thought of the Train Spotting thing where he dives into the toilet for the suppository. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there. Yeah, we're getting a little off track here.
That was such a good scene, though, eh?
Yeah. I have mixed feelings about that movie.
Yeah, well, it's a scary movie.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's transition to hockey. I think that was
rest in peace, Guy Lafleur.
It's a tough topic, but I don't think that he'd want people bemoaning, to be honest, from what little I know of him. I think that he wants people telling the funny stuff about his life and, these different things. So before we get on to talk about the Minnesota Wild and St. Louis Blues, check out Ken's writing, kencampbell.substack.com. You can get this full episode there. Please check us out on Apple Podcasts. We are now currently with the Hockey Podcast Network. You can check out the clips of this if you just want, 10-minute segments on YouTube with the Hockey Unfiltered on YouTube, or you can get the full episodes at Hockey Unfiltered and the Hockey Podcast Network YouTube channel. We will also be doing some live stuff there coming up.